here we are at J.C. Raulston at the Scree Garden. Scree is this gravelly surface that helps us plant plants that need really good drainage. And our first plant of this list is Agave americana. It's the century plant right here. It's a succulent perennial plant. The leaves are a rosette of thick, fleshy leaves, generally ending in a sharp point. And let me tell you, that thing is sharp. While I was in Mexico, I saw that they would use that like a sewing needle to create baskets or other things. It can also have a very spiny margin. These are not friendly plants, really. What's beautiful about the leaves is that they leave a mark on the underside of the previous leaves, so you can kind of see the indentations of those. You can really see it more in this middle part. The flowers, once they bloom, die. And they are on a tubular mast or stem that comes out of the center of the plant. Once it blooms, the whole plant dies. It has an amazing structure, and it has what we call these little sucker plants or babies. So here, this is, ouch, ow. This is a baby of this big plant, and they come out of the base of the plant and make a new plant. They are, of course, are deer resistant and landscape architect professor resistant. There is a agave tequiliana, which is what tequila is made out of in Mexico, and they are native to the Southwest and Mexico. If you look up close here, you can see the little pup from this plant. You can see 1, 2, 3, and way down here, that third generation of the next pup coming along. And that's our first plant, the Agave americana. Okay, look what I found. I told you about the agave. Look up, there's the mast with the beautiful structure that's about to bloom. And these take a long time to develop. So you see the magnificent agave, well worth growing, this very dramatic plant with all its pups. Our next plant is Yucca filamentosa. It's a succulent perennial plant named Yucca, Adam's needle, Spanish bayonet. Yucca filamentosa grows in dry soils, in sand dunes, and in coastal regions. We do see it all over our North Carolina coast. Right here we can see the leaves, which are long, narrow, strap-like, with a spine at the tip. What's also distinctive about the leaves is that they have these fibrous threads. You see these little curly threads? Maybe, there we go. The little curly threads. I love the shadow on my card there. Those curly fibrous threads along the margins are also indicative of this plant. They have a showy bell-shaped flower, as you can see behind me in this variety. This variety hasn't bloomed, hasn't opened yet, but we do see them open here. And they hang down from a central stalk. Now, this is not like the century plant, the agave. It will keep throwing up more stalks. It won't kill the plant. But the stalk can be up to 12 feet tall with flowers that have 6 white petals. And this yucca will provide offshoots at the base, kind of like the agave does. The flowers are edible. While I was in Mexico, when these are fresh and newly blossomed, they harvest them and they make a beautiful soup out of them, and also cook them with garlic and all these other delicious things and put them in tortillas. Oh my gosh, fabulous. So one of my host families invited me to go with them to harvest them and process them and prepare them for eating. It was just an incredible experience to do that with them. Something interesting about the yucca, its pollinator is a moth, which has a very specific species. Which is a very specific species that pollinates just this plant. So that's called mutualism, where they depend on each other for pollination. And that is Yucca filamentosa. Our next plant is the glossy Abelia, Abelia grandiflora. It's a deciduous, small to medium shrub growing 3 to 6 feet, even to 8 feet high. The leaves are opposite on the branch, simple, ovate, with a dentate margin, lustrous dark above, and they turn bronze red in the winter. The stems are, when young, are pubescent, reddish to purple to reddish brown. The bark is peeling in string-like threads, and the habit is spreading dense, rounded, multi-stem with arching cane-like branches. The flowers are white, flush pink, funnel-shaped, which we don't see here today, and slightly fragrant. About 3/4 of an inch sepals develop the sepals develop a rose tinge, and they're persistent for months. We'll get you a picture of these flowers because it's very significant about way to see this plant. It attracts butterflies and hummingbirds. I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. It prefers acid, moist, well-drained soil, full sun to part shade, and is drought tolerant. This plant is prolific in the landscape. I can't say it's one of my favorites. At this time of year, it looks pretty good. For one thing, it always has this sort of brown, coppery look on most cultivars. And I just don't find it attractive in the landscape because it is sort of leggy and twiggy. But I had a little hedge of it. It's often used as a hedge at my house. It's been there for over 20 years. And I've decided one day I'm gonna cut that thing down. And right as I went out to look at it and make my final decision to go ahead and cut them all down, I saw a hummingbird. And so no way was I gonna take that thing down. So I would say the most valuable thing about this plant is that it does attract butterflies and hummingbirds. For that reason alone, it's worth growing. But I would put it in a place that's away and don't depend on it to be too much of a structure, or, it just doesn't look healthy because of all that bronze most of the year. And the seed, it does have like a little helicopter sort of structure that's also really interesting. And when I come in from working in the yard, I often find them mixed up in my curls. So anyway, for those reasons, I have become attached to Abelia grandiflora, the glossy Abelia. Our next plant is Hydrangea macrophylla, the big leaf hydrangea. Now, we're going to learn several hydrangeas because hydrangeas do great in our area. It is a deciduous, small to medium shrub growing 3 to 6 feet high. The leaves are opposite, simple, elliptic, coarsely serrate, and with wide triangular teeth. They're medium to dark green above and have sort of a fleshy, almost greasy texture to the touch, almost like a cabbage leaf. So if you come up and close and take a look at that leaf, you can kind of see it's very flexible, and it really does feel kind of greasy. But the leaves actually are very showy. On the branch here, we have the remnant of last year's flower, which was, it was a panicle. The flowers vary. They have a sterile outer flowers that are pink to bluish purple. The fertile flowers are blue and turning pink, borne on large, broad, flat-topped branch coryn in July, August, and they form on the previous year's growth. So you have to be careful when to prune this plant. They like moist, well-drained soil and full sun, and you can see this one's growing in shade or part shade. In acid soil with pHs between 5 and 5.5, the flowers will be blue. If you have alkaline soil anywhere between 6 and 6.5, the flowers are pink. So you can control the color of the flowers in this plant. They are not cold hardy in northern states, but there's about 500 cultivars of this plant. And I have a good memory of this, seen mostly at the coast in these big masses of hydrangea plants with their great big mop head flowers, as showy as they can be in that hot weather at the coast. That to me is this hydrangea, the big leaf hydrangea. And that concludes the hydrangea macrophylla. Our next plant is right here, the Prunus mume. Again, one of my favorite plants. It's also known as the Japanese apricot or the flowering apricot. It's in the Rosaceae family, and it's really grown for its beautiful flowers that are showy in January. So this is one of your first plants that blooms in the wintertime. The flowers are handsome, pale, white to pink to even red, depending on which cultivar you're talking about. They can be single or double, and they're fragrant. They have the softest little fragrance, and they flower before the leaves come. The habit, as you see, is this rounded sort of habit, and it can be sort of pendulous depending on which one you're looking at. The leaves are alternate. I don't want to step on these lovely ground covers. But if you can see, pull some of these leaves down. The leaves are alternate on the branch, simple, here we go, broad ovate, and finely and sharply serrate. They have a rich green above and pubescent on the veins below. So it has really nice foliage besides being, and they are kind of lighter below. The stems are polished, shiny green with glabrous and supple. The fruits look just like an apricot. They're not edible, but you can cook them with sugar to make preserves. I saw some women harvesting the ripened fruit that had fallen on the ground one day at NC State, and I have one of these at my house that I bought because it has my mother's name, Josephine, and it has a very pale pink, beautiful sweet smell in January, and wonderful fruit this time of year. Ooh, it's chilly today. I need my shawl. Anyway, I picked up the fruit and made a preserve just like any other. And I actually served it to my students in this class at the end of class. So anyway, Durr says it's not edible, but I say it is. And that is the Prunus mume. There are 250 named cultivars, and it was also a favorite of J.C. Raulston. And I can see why. Our next plant is the prickly pear, Opuntia facentha. It's in the Cactaceae family, and you see it behind me. Its habit is a dense, sort of localized thicket. It's this plant right here with the big spines that you can see, but look just behind me on this side. This one barely has spines. So sometimes there are varieties that have less sort of scary spines on them. The leaf is a flat green pad bearing wool and spines, and the spines are brown, reddish brown, or gray up to 3 centimeters in length. The flowers, which we don't see any today, but they're right here on the tips here, that will open up, and it's the most beautiful, gentle, soft looking flower that's kind of a contradiction to this coarse plant. They're bright yellow with reddish lenticels and sometimes peach, pinkish, or reddish. The fruit, it makes like a little purple, sort of green, purple, fleshy fruit that is delicious. My uncle, when I was visiting him in Mexico, just picked one of the fruit, risking getting the spines in his hands, peeled it, and cut it up and let us all taste this sweet, delicious, juicy fruit that's the fruit of this plant. The pads themselves are also edible and highly prized in the Mexican cuisine. The clochids are the small spine-like structures on the pads that lodge into the skin. They're little teeny tiny ones. It's not these great big ones. Those little teeny tiny ones are the ones that really hurt because you can't get them out. Yeah, I think that's all from my card, but I've seen this used in landscapes, mostly the one that doesn't have the pricklies, which you can see, as a very dramatic plant on a very hot, sunny, dry slope. You really want good drainage for this plant. But I think the prickly pear is really well worth growing. You can eat it, you can enjoy the flowers, you can eat the leaves, and it's beautiful. Our next plant is Loropetalum chinensis, the fringe flower, or just plain Loropetalum. It's in the Hamomeliaceae family, like the first plant we learned. It's an evergreen, small tree or large shrub, growing 6 to 10 feet high, but I've seen it as big as 15 feet. And 30 feet in Japan for some of the very mature ones. The leaves are alternate, simple, evergreen, ovate to rounded, and with a pointed apex. They're oblique at the base and finely toothed, essentially, though the margin seems entire. They can range from dark green to this burgundy purple, as you see. Here's the mature leaf back here where you see it's green, and the new leaves are burgundy. You can see the big difference there. The habit is a rounded evergreen with whip-like branches, and the leaves are borne in a single plane, so you can see kind of these layers. It can be limbed up, and it wants to be sort of this vase shape. If you can see the trunk there. The bark does exfoliate in large strips, as you can see, which is also ornamental. The flowers are perfect, fragrant, for creamy white to pink, strap-shaped in April. So we've missed them, but here's a little picture of what the flowers look like. Remember Hamamelis? Remember the witch hazel? Same family. The fruit is a woody, ovoid, nut-like capsule, which is not significant, and it prefers acid, moist, well-drained soils, sun to part shade, and it takes really well to pruning. Now, people use this shrub. They buy it really tiny in the nursery, and they bring it home, or the landscape designers bring it to the site, and these plants want to be like this. So you could be creating a pruning nightmare by putting these in the wrong place. Now, there are cultivars now that are more dwarf, meaning they grow really slow. But J.C. Raulston once told me there is no such thing as a dwarf. They just are growing super slow, and eventually it will get to the height that, you know, no longer could be described as dwarf. Anyway, Loropetalum, grown for its beautiful flowers and the fact that it's evergreen. It's a great landscape and really tough plant. Our next plant is gardenia. Gardenia jasminoides is a evergreen large shrub, actually medium-sized shrub, growing 4 to 6 feet tall. Again, I'm 5 feet, so this is well over 6 feet. The leaves are opposite or whorled, simple, evergreen, lanceolate to obovate, entire margins with lustrous dark green, sort of leathery, kind of like Okuba, light green below, and the veins are impressed or rib-like in the back. I can feel the little pressed veins in the back. Now, we grow gardenia for its beautiful flower. It's a perfect 6 to 7 petaled, waxy white, aging to yellow, solitary, and very fragrant in June. You know what gardenias are. They're these white, beautiful flowers that brides carry in their bouquets. Yours truly had gardenias in her bouquet. The stems are greenish and young. They see the young branches, and then they turn to brown as they age. The habit is a dense, rounded shrub, so it makes a really nice landscape plant. It likes acid, moist, well-drained soil, full sun to part shade. For me, the South and gardenias just go together. Now, gardenias, if they don't get enough sun or if they're stressed for some reason, tend to can get leggy, but they take very well to pruning. Mine is kind of stressed because it's kind of in a place where it's competing for sun in my garden, and I have pruned it back and it just sends out new beautiful growth. But really what we want to do, and you can see right here the beginning of that flower, and look how dramatic. The flower opens up like a pinwheel, and this is the calyx that's surrounded, which is kind of spiky. It's just a beautiful, beautiful plant. Gardenia jasminoides. Our next plant is the Cunninghamia lanceolata, the China fir. It's an evergreen, large tree that grows 30 to 75 feet high. Look how beautiful and tall this tree is. And you can see cones on it from last year and from this year. The habit of the China fir is pyramidal with pendulous branches. It looks exotic and ragged. The bark is brown and scaly, as you can see, almost like Chamaecyparis. The flowers are monoecious, and the male flowers are in clusters, and they're not really showy. The fruit, though, are several in cones together, and we saw, as I pointed out, way at the top, you can see the clusters of green cones. I don't see them down here, but the clusters of green cones, and then you see last year's cones with the brown that are just below the branches. They like moist, acid, well-drained soil. They prefer a little shade, a little protection, and then they prefer a little protection from the wind. They're really more of a specimen plant. You just can't put this anywhere. It is prickly. So take a look at these leaves. I'm gonna hold it, ouch. It's prickly. I'm gonna hold it gently and turn it over. So the leaves are evergreen, spirally arranged on the main axis and stand out on the underside. They turn upward by a basal twist, appearing to spring from the sides, and they persist 5 or more years. They are lanceolate, and the margins are finely toothed, and the apex has a point. That's what just got me. Now, they have these bands of stomata, these little white openings in the leaf that allow gas exchange, and you can see the little bands, the little white bands along there that really contribute to the look of this exotic plant. Cunninghamia lanceolata, you want a lot of room. They do lend themselves up, and so you see the beautiful red bark and then the tree above, which is preferred so that people don't get close to get poked. The China fir, Cunninghamia lanceolata. Next, I want to talk about 2 plants in the Vitex genus, Vitex negundo and Vitex agnus castus. Let's start with Vitex negundo, which is right behind me, the chaste tree. The chaste tree is a small deciduous shrub, a tree, or a large deciduous shrub. And you might ask me, well, Julie, why would you plant this thing? It is kind of raggedy, and its habit is not too bad in leaf, but can be very airy, open, and vase-shaped, but can get ratty with time. But the reason we grow this tree is because it has beautiful flowers that are in 3 to 6 inch long racemes with a lilac to pale violet flowers in June that look something like, almost like a butterfly bush. Now if we look at Vitex negundo, if you come up close, you can see this little leaf they're opposite on the branch. You see they're just opposite from each other, and it's a palmately compound leaf that has entire or serrate margins, but this has the little lobes to the leaflets. The stems are compressed at nodes and quadrangular. If you touch this, you can feel that they're squarish. They're slender, and they have U-shaped leaf scars. They like moist, well-drained soil and full sun. They really like it hot. That's another good reason why we grow this here in the South. So they're native to Africa, Madagascar, Asia, or the Philippines, but there's a reason why they're called the chaste tree, and it may actually have the opposite effect. So this is said to be used in a tea to keep priests chaste. But it's also been used by the Greeks in their preservation of matrons' chastity during the sort of a fertility protective festival, and they would put the leaves on the bed, and it was, you know, quite the opposite, trying to have fertility so that the couple would have children. Anyway, who knows, for one way or another, the chaste tree is what it's called. Now we've got Vitex agnus castus, another chaste tree. But here you can really see how ratty it gets with age. But if you look up, you can just see that the palmately arranged leaves don't have the lobes on the leaflets. That's a big difference for these. And the color of the flowers, again, range from blue to pink. And the leaves, you know, have these sort of 5 radiating fingerlet leaflets. And they are aromatic when bruised. So if I take one and crush it, it's a really strong smell. So that is a picture of the Vitex agnus castus. You see these grown often on the roadsides, and I've seen them in parks and in large campuses because even though it's kind of ratty here because it's in too much shade, it wants a little more sun, it can be stunning when pruned properly and have those blue blossoms in the heat of the summer. And that's the chaste tree. We're finishing our time today for this list at J.C. Raulston Arboretum with a very important and special plant. It's this Japanese maple behind me. Acer palmatum, or the Japanese maple, is a small deciduous tree growing 15 to 25 feet high. There are many dissectum types of plants that can grow up to 6 to 8 feet high. The habit is typically rounded and has layered branching, as you can see. The leaf color varies, but leaves emerge early, greenish to yellow to bronze to orange to purple and red, depending on the cultivar or how much sun it has. Night temperatures can affect that color. The flowers are small, red-purple in May and June in the new leaves, but are not very significant. The fruit is a samara with wide wings, sometimes red, and actually can be very showy. It likes moist, well-drained soil, and we typically like to have it nicely mulched to help it get through the hot summers, to keep those roots cool. These plants are used as an accent plant, or sometimes in a shrub border to show that punch of color. They're native to Japan, China, and Korea. There's the dissected types and the non-dissected type. The dissected type is referred to as filigree, and this is an example. And just let me show you the beautiful dissected leaf of this particular Japanese maple, and then I'll tell you a story about this maple. There's the beautiful palmately, deeply lobed leaf. I want you to just see the structure of the branching, because just being able to enjoy that is just a magnificent treat. Dr. Raulston, along with a group of students, went and dug this tree from a donor who donated it for the Arboretum. This was one of the first trees that really was a significant tree here at the Arboretum. And he and his students rolled up the roots. They didn't cut them, they dug them and rolled them out from about, 20 feet out, and came in and rolled them up, protected them, loaded the tree on a truck, brought it here, unrolled the roots, secured it, and here it's been for as long as I can remember, at least 30, 40 years now. So that is the story of this particular Japanese maple. And I hope you come see it in person when we're open again at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum.